to this sweet episode of The Coolest Coast. I'm Tina Prigge, and today we are discovering honey and the bee makers of Manitowoc County that make it. You're watching The Coolest Coast.
The hive inspection, we're looking to see just kind of what's the status of what's happening in the hive. We do this every 1 to 2 weeks during the summer. We try to look in the hives. As a beekeeper, we want to make sure they're not running out of room to store honey and pollen, and they have room to lay their eggs, and just the hive. As beekeepers, we want the hive to continue to expand throughout the season. And the way we do that is making sure we can add extra boxes on as needed. We'll take a peek in today. But we just want to give you a sense of what it's like to look inside of a beehive. We're going to put a little smoke around the entrances where the bees are coming and going, and that smoke will help mask any alarm pheromones that are given off by the guard bees.
Because if you get stung, they're going to put an attack pheromone. When they sting you, they put an attack pheromone on you, and the other bees will come to that to defend their hive.
That's a fact.
That's a fact.
The bees have different roles throughout their life cycle. Foragers out in the field, they clean and feed the young larvae and young bees. Here we have a box with what we call frames in it, and the bees are busy building out the comb and filling these frames with nectar and pollen. It's hard to see probably in here, but there's liquid honey in those cells. The motion of their wings in the hive creates airflow up through the hive, and that'll dry out that nectar. So when it gets below about 16% moisture content, they will put a little wax cap over each cell, and that's honey. By the time the bees cap it and put a little wax cap on it, the moisture content's low enough that it'll keep basically forever as long as it's kept sealed. If you keep it away from the air so it doesn't absorb moisture, that'll essentially keep forever. So here we're down to what's called the brood box. So this is the part of the hive where the bees would tend to, the queen would lay eggs and they would be raising young bees, in addition to possibly storing honey and nectar and pollen. So this is an example of what the capped honey looks like. So when it's fully cured and dried out, they'll put little wax caps over each cell, and it'll keep like this indefinitely. And the bees, their instinct is to put up as much stores as they can for winter. We as beekeepers take advantage of their natural instinct to do that, and we create an atmosphere where they have we keep giving them more room, so they'll keep trying to fill it. So they put up a lot more honey than they'll need to survive a winter. As beekeepers, to be responsible, we have to leave them enough food for their winter, so all the honey that's left in this box will stay here for the winter, and they'll keep gathering yet this fall. So we're gonna leave all this honey in for the bees for the winter food. And there's typically about 70 to 90 pounds of honey left in the hive for a full-size hive like this. And people are intimidated by bees, thinking, but you can see, but they're fairly docile. So this has got a little bit of brood here. The cap cells are developing bees that are these are starting to bulge, which means the bees are about ready to emerge. As they transform from larva, the pupa into a bee, they eventually emerge as a fully developed bee. They actually chew their way out through a little wax cap. And that's what these are just about ready to do that. There's 3 types of bees in the hive. There was 1 queen, and then there's the vast majority of these are we call workers. They're female. The queen is the only fertile female in the hive. She can lay fertile eggs, so she can lay worker eggs. There are some males in the hive. They're referred to as drones. There are not a lot of them. Out of the 40,000 or 50,000 bees that are in this hive, there might only be 400 or 500 drones. So they are there just in case they need to raise a new queen. The drones would go out and mate with the new queen. There's 3 different types of bees: the queen, the worker, and the drone. And it gives you an idea of when the queen lays an egg. A new queen is raised in 16 days from when the egg is laid. A worker takes 21 days, and then a drone takes 24 days. There's some little tiny larvae in the bottom of a lot of these cells. So the queen has laid eggs in there at least 3 days ago because they're hatched already. The eggs themselves look like a little tiny, almost like a little piece of rice sticking out of the bottom of the cell, right in the middle of the cell is sticking up. And then when they hatch, they fall over and the workers will feed them a little bit of royal jelly. So it's a little like comma-shaped larva in the bottom of a cell with a little bit of wetness around it. All the bees in this hive are descended from 1 queen. So she laid the eggs for every one of these bees. She can lay up to 2,000 eggs per day. So there's more brood, we call it. It's the capped larva in these cells here. And then there's honey here around the perimeter. The way they improve their genetics is when there's a new queen born, she will go out in her first week of her life. She'll go out on a number of mating flights. She'll mate with typically 12 to 15 drones, and she'll store enough sperm to last her whole life. The workers basically work themselves to death. They only live about 6 weeks in the summertime because they're working very, very hard. The queen can live several years. Not as common to see that anymore. Each hive has its own queen. So again, each hive will have 1 queen, lots of workers, and some drones. These bees will fly up to 3 miles to collect pollen and nectar. So they're taking that nectar and pollen that they're gathering every day. They're using it to feed the new young larvae, and they're also feeding themselves. They do have preferences, although they're not that picky. We have a hawthorn tree here that has very, very fragrant flowers, and when it's in bloom in the springtime, the tree just buzzes. You can hear the whole tree buzzing because it's just full of bees. But they do pollinate lots and lots of flowers. I mean, and lots of vegetables and other things. When a bee goes out every day for foraging for nectar and pollen, they can visit sometimes a couple hundred flowers in that one trip. They don't each make very much honey, but there's a lot of them. So that you're talking about 50,000 bees that might only live up to 6 weeks. They're constantly being replenished by eggs and larvae being laid every day. Each bee only makes about 1/12 of a teaspoon of honey in their lifetime. So it takes lots of bees to make this much honey. But there are a lot of bees in a hive. As hobbyists, we only harvest our honey once a year, and that's pretty typical for your hobbyist beekeeper. I think they're the only insect that actually keeps their home warm through the winter. So they will cluster together, they call it. They'll pack themselves in against each other, and they can wiggle their wing muscles, their flight muscles, without moving their wings, and it's kind of like shivering, but it generates body heat. So they're using they actually will kind of fatten themselves up going into winter, and they use their body fat to generate heat. So they stay in that cluster, that ball of bees inside the hive. They'll pack themselves in between the frames and in those cells, and they get in really tight. And they can they'll keep packing themselves until it gets about 15 degrees Fahrenheit, and then they have to shiver harder to stay warm. But they can keep getting tighter and tighter and tighter until it gets down to about 15. And during that time, the bees will kind of slowly rotate from the outside of that cluster towards the middle. So they're almost constantly changing places. And so they say that, and the queen will be somewhere near the middle. The middle of that cluster of bees throughout our winter will stay between 90 and 95 degrees Fahrenheit, where the outer edge of that cluster might be in the 40s.
Stay sweet on the coolest coast.